There is nothing here but buildings. For millions of miles in every direction, it's just a jagged disarray of skyscrapers shooting up from the ground like stalagmites. They're connected by bridges spanning hundreds of miles across bottomless pits. Staircases wind thousands of feet into the air before dropping off into nothing. Some parts of the city, the ancient parts, millions of miles below the rest, are still sort of familiar. There are windows, doors, stonework, air ducts. But the highest points of the city don't even resemble human architecture at all anymore. It looks like the inside of a machine, all metal plates and spires and pipes, like humans were never meant to be here. This is undoubtedly a city of some sort, but who is it for? I've never actually visited a city myself, so there's always a chance I'm missing something here. Maybe this place isn't as uncanny as I think. Maybe all cities feel this way to some extent. But then, I don't think your cities usually hang upside down, do they? This, of course, is not a real place. It's the setting of a dystopian sci-fi manga from the late 90s called Blame by Tsutomu Nihei. The entirety of the plot takes place here in this one city. It's an interesting enough story, but I honestly didn't read it for the story. I read it because every page turn meant I got to see more of this city. Which is what it's called, by the way. It doesn't even have a name, it's just the city. The manga seems to want you to obsess over it. There are entire pages with no dialogue at all, no speech bubbles to break up your view of the environment. It's pretty clear to me that the city is meant to be more than just a backdrop for this story. It seems more like the focal point. The characters in this story seem more like set dressing than the literal set dressing does. In both an artistic and a narrative sense, the people that this city was meant to support have taken a back seat to it. The city has quite literally taken over. It's a paradox, a city that exists for its own sake. Which begs the question, is it even a city anymore? And if not, what is it? Do you ever feel like news reports are feeding you a narrative rather than real information? Yeah, me too. It's exhausting. After a while, you just stop wanting to read the news at all. Which is why I use our sponsor, Ground News, instead. It lets me see all sides of the story and break out of my own political bias. Visit ground.news/Talefoundry to get an entire 40% off your subscription. It's time to stop letting algorithms decide your worldview. I wasn't exaggerating when I said that this manga wants you to obsess. You are supposed to goggle constantly at the city in all its greebled-out glory. There are 2-page spreads of just crazy, nonsensical structures that I'm not even sure can be properly called buildings. But after spending enough time staring at the cityscape, you begin to realize that, as suffocatingly complex and overconstructed as it is, it's also incredibly empty. There's almost nothing to look at but architecture. One of my first impressions looking at Nihei's art is how good he is at building design. I found out later that he was actually a formally trained architect before he became a mangaka, which, yeah, that checks out. The style reminds me of the work of sci-fi artist Mobius, with the rich little details and emphasis on environment. He also cites Clive Barker as an inspiration, which, when you see some of the characters in this story, not hard to see why. There's such a strong sense of depth to all this art. It almost gives me vertigo, like I'm at risk of falling inside the page whenever I look at it. The city seems to alternate between towering buildings packed so close together that you'd feel trapped between them, and huge, empty expanses that would make you feel completely exposed. It makes no sense. It gives no shelter, provides no utility, has no purpose. It looks like a city. It's anything but habitable. You may have seen this image before, a long-term nuclear waste warning message. It's one of many. They're designed to convey one critical message to humans up to 10,000 years in the future. This place is not safe. The challenge here is that we have no idea if humans will still be speaking the same languages in 10,000 years, so whatever form the message takes will have to be universally, instinctually understood. About 30 years ago, a team of experts came up with a few hypothetical options for what these could look like. They included spikes coming up from the ground, enormous blocks covering the landscape, and other ways of making the Earth itself uninhabitable. Which makes sense. After all, the aim was to dissuade humans from trying to live there and getting themselves killed. Now, look at this city. Huge bridges with no railings that cross bottomless pits. Staircases that extend for miles leading directly into a wall. Elevators that would take you days to ride to the top. To me, the city in blame accomplishes the same thing as these warning messages. You couldn't live there even if you tried. Even the scale is off. The city has extended across the entire solar system and is thought to be about the size of Jupiter's orbit. Remember how I mentioned that some parts of the city are just huge, empty spaces? This room, if you want to call it that, which suspiciously happens to be the exact diameter of Jupiter, is an example of that. Spoiler, it's where Jupiter used to be. The city is literally consuming entire planets. It's like this city is trying to say to you, with every Escherian stairway and inverted spire, this place is not safe. So then, why build a place like this to begin with? What kind of people would disassemble entire planets to build empty rooms and then just not use them? How did all this madness ever stand to benefit anybody? The lower you go into the city, the closer you get to Earth, and the more familiar it all begins to feel. This is the part of the city that humans designed. You can still tell it apart. It's got houses and shops. It's even got phone booths. But somewhere along the way, the humans stopped designing, and machines took over. A puzzle piece should be sliding into place for you now. Yep, the city was built by AI, constructed by robotic builders who were originally given instructions from humans on how the city should be designed. How could that ever go wrong? At some point, of course, the humans lost the ability to control the builders. With no direct instructions to go off of anymore, no impetus except for the logical scaffolding humans had created them with, the builders sort of just did whatever they wanted. They went haywire, building a cityscape with absolutely no vision behind it whatsoever, and their human creators were unable to do anything at all to stop them. When the builders were first commissioned, there were certain humans who possessed what was called the net terminal gene. This gene allowed its carriers to log into the net sphere, think of the internet but on steroids. If you could access the net sphere, you could control the builders. But if you tried to access the net sphere without the gene, you'd be hunted down by a robotic security force called the Safeguards. Unfortunately for literally everyone, during construction, mysterious infections swept through the human population and the net terminal gene was nearly wiped out, which means that now, nobody can log into the net sphere, and nobody can control the builders. If you tried to, you'd alert the Safeguards. The humans got locked out of their own smart house. What resulted was 3,000 years of non-stop city construction by machines that don't know anything about cities besides sometimes there are staircases. Now the surviving humans are forced to live in an enormous M.C. Escher drawing, not exactly an environment suited to such fragile beings. In fact, humans are now at the bottom of the food chain. There are the Safeguards to compete with, yes, but the city is also overrun by a race of cyborgs known simply as Silicon Life. The Silicon Life are exactly what they sound like. They're related to humans, but they're silicon cyborgs instead of carbon-based organisms. The net sphere doesn't recognize them as legitimate citizens, and, when functioning properly, will send Safeguards to terminate them. But since the net sphere has basically been bricked for thousands of years, the Silicon Life are able to roam freely throughout the city. which means that there's a near constant three-way war between the humans, the safeguards, and the Silicon Life, and the humans are losing. The only hope for the survival of the human race is to find someone among them who still somehow possesses the net terminal gene. If the humans can regain control, they can rebuild a more hospitable city and wrangle the safeguards. That would also mean eradicating the Silicon Life. So, I guess the position of the Silicon Life as anti-humanity is actually kind of defensible. The main series has an open-ended conclusion. We aren't told whether the humans are successful in their search. Technically, there is a sequel that implies that they are, but I like how ambiguous the ending of this first series is. It feels significant to me, like this world is an exploration of what could happen if things spiral out of humanity's control. This is what happens if humans can't solve all the problems they create. That, I think, is the root of what is so interesting to me about the city. It's a city, a purely human concept, but it wasn't built by humans, and it certainly wasn't built for humans. It wasn't really built for anybody. Humans are just a distant memory to the city. In this world, humans have edged themselves out of their place as the dominant force, and the environment originally intended to support and protect them has virtually forgotten all about them. I think, again, of those nuclear waste warning messages. When they were being designed, there was a written warning that was supposed to be the basis for what the visuals should convey. I'm going to read part of it for you now, and I want you to think about it within the context of Blame City. We considered ourselves to be a powerful culture. This place is not a place of honor. No highly esteemed deed is commemorated here. Nothing valued is here. This place is best shunned and uninhabited. Isn't that chilling? In Blame, they wanted an immense sanctuary that could support an exponentially growing population and would require no labor to build. But now they're fighting for their lives. You, humans in the real world, wanted nuclear power and weapons, and now you have this. I asked a question at the start of this video. If the city has ceased to be a city, then what is it? How do we interpret this thing? What has it become? In the story, the downfall of humanity is framed a bit more like an accident. This mysterious infection wiped out the net terminal gene. Unfortunate, but ultimately unavoidable. But humans aren't innocent here. They didn't just lose control of the builders because of some random bug in the system. In the prequel Noise, we find out that a cult known as the Order has been trying to force humanity's evolution. They were experimenting on human subjects, the humans too poor to afford net terminal gene implants, and turning them into Silicon Life. The infection that wiped out the gene was released by the Order and directly ushered in humanity's downfall. The Order, despite their status as a small fringe cult, were still humans, and their desire to become something more than human led to all of this. The city is not a city. It is an omen. This is what happens when humanity betrays itself. I'm not here to make some sweeping statement about the overall state of humanity, but you have to admit, it's not sounding so much like some weird fantasy anymore, is it? I mean, how different is this from an AI that does art, of all things, so that humans don't get to anymore? How is it different from a cabal of corporations continuously lobbying against long-term human interests like healthy drinking water and a cool atmosphere to protect profit margins? How is it different from a lust for power so strong that you'd create the tools of your own destruction? Will you, as a species, look back on all of this and say, we considered ourselves to be a powerful culture? Will the place you stand be one of honor? Will there be anything left to value and commemorate? Maybe. The future you build will be a reflection of what you value. Maybe it will be a world designed after the well-being of humans, as they exist today, with all their petty needs and flaws. Maybe the desire to take care of yourselves and each other will eventually eclipse all your other ambitions. Or maybe you'll end up building cities for nobody. I wish it were as simple as reorienting your values. I wish we could guarantee a future where AI is nothing but useful to humans and everyone starts working to protect the Earth and its atmosphere. But the truth is that changing the world often isn't really a matter of facts and logic. It's often just a matter of storytelling. I like stories, of course, but I don't want to live in a narrative. Who does? So, to ground myself in reality, I use Ground News. It's an app and a website that really cuts through all the noise of social media and news outlets. It was designed by a former NASA engineer to give you the quickest, clearest, and most data-driven way to read the news. Every story comes with an actual visual breakdown of the political biases in reporting, the factuality of reports, and the ownership of sources, all backed by 3 independent news monitoring organizations. So you don't have to wonder anymore how honest your news is being with you. You can literally just look across the whole political spectrum and compare. You'll be surprised what details are emphasized, exaggerated, or just plain left out, even by sources you like. I mean, just look at this story. Pretty innocuous. ChatGPT makes a deal with Reddit to train its databases from the site's content. But if you take a closer look, you can immediately see the slant. Like, this site calls Reddit, of all places, a leftist forum. Incredible. It helps to see that in context with all the other headlines. It also helps that, along with each source, there are factuality ratings and representations of who owns the story. You can even see the political leanings of the story overall. This one is pretty much split 50-50 down the political spectrum, but not all stories are like that. In fact, one of my favorite features here is the blind spot feed, which specifically focuses on news stories disproportionately covered by one side of the political spectrum. It's a fantastic way to peek outside of your echo chamber and make sure that, you aren't being trapped by whoever is reporting to you. There are valuable stories you're going to miss if you just rely on algorithms to get your news, because, they're catered to you, and when all your news is catered specifically to you, it stops representing reality very quickly and just starts to represent, the interests of advertisers, the engagement and monetization goals of whatever platform is serving you the news. Ground News is a way to finally break out of the narrative and just get some actual information about what's going on in the world. If this is as exciting to you as it is to me, I have good news for you. With our link, you can get access to all of this at 40% off. 40%! An insane discount. Just visit ground.news/TaleFoundry or click the link in the description and sign up for the Vantage plan. It's time to stop letting algorithms decide your worldview. Ground yourself in reality with Ground News. Anyway, that's all for this one. Thanks for watching and keep making stuff up. I'll see you next week. Bye!